Welcome to Ecotopia U Media. I'm Melissa McGinnis, your host, joined by my fabulous co-host, Tom Wright.
Thank you. My first name gets longer every day.
I'm so excited because one of my favorite guests is back with us today, Conrad Mackarron. Conrad, so great to see you.
Hi, Melissa. Great to be back. Hi, Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
We always learn so much from Conrad, so I'm excited for today. What do you want to talk about with Conrad?
Well, I think Conrad, there's several topics. Conrad's been on the email. He's been emailing us a lot recently, but go ahead. You know some news about the Closed Loop Fund, and explain to the audience, remind the audience who the Closed Loop Fund is first.
So the Closed Loop Fund is a program, a fund started by Walmart and several other large consumer goods companies, a $100 million fund that is designed to loan funds to startups, but also mainly the municipalities to try to improve the quality of curbside recycling. And so they're just getting off the ground, and today they released their first 3 projects. And so that information is online, easy to get to. But it's interesting in the sense that it does, in terms of my work, it does show a measure of initial responsibility by some of these large companies to say, yes, we do have some responsibility for improving recycling curbside and also helping to finance that. Although, of course, as a loan, we're not actually investing a lot of money, but still, it's I see it as a positive step forward. And do you have a agenda today? Did you want to talk about flexible packaging, or?
Yeah, I think we want to talk about flexible packaging.
What's your pleasure?
Yeah, we want to talk about flexible packaging. I think and we want to talk about the fact that also the information came out that that Americans are trashing a lot more than we previously knew they were trashing. And also the New York Supreme Court reversed the ban on styrofoam packaging in New York City. So there's several topics to talk to you about.
Right.
Which one you want?
Right.
Which one you want to take on? Which one do you want to start with?
Well, the New York decision, I think, is only a preliminary decision because they call it the Supreme Court, but I think it's still a decision that can be appealed. So it's not a final decision. So that program is still up in the air, but certainly I guess it would be seen as a setback for New York City, which wanted to avoid having to try to recycle that foam materials. And I think the Dart Container and other makers of foam were trying to promote that and say that felt they could offer quality recycling services in New York City. So that's to be continued, I guess. But interesting that a court has found that the city needs to develop a recycling program. So, but you know, that I guess that brings us to flexible packaging, which we may have touched on in some past efforts, but it really is the continuing focus now of my work, a principal focus. You know, when you walk into a Whole Foods or a Safeway, you see so many packages now that are used to be in paper or in glass, and they're in these foil pouches, and they look cool, they look shiny, they're very efficient, but as we know, they don't have a very good end-of-life story. They're not currently recyclable in the US or in most parts of the world, and yet I've seen data showing that it's an enormously fast-growing kind of packaging. It's only second to corrugated paper, so it's now, you know, it's beat glass and it's beat other kinds of plastic in terms of its usage. And so the industry is going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to find a solution to collecting this material so that it doesn't all end up in the landfill. And we had focused some of our efforts for the last couple of years on what we consider an iconic product, the Pre-Sun pouch that a lot of parents are familiar with. If you have kids, they're drinking their juice out of a container that's a laminated material that has some aluminum on it. It's basically several kinds of polyethylene, I believe, and most all of those go into the landfill, except a few that go to TerraCycle. And
explain a little bit about the range of flexible packaging, because also besides the pouch, there's also flexible packaging now that is a mixture of laminates and then a rigid spout. They're squeezable. What I find tough about the quote unquote recyclability of the issue is that we're not talking about just one type of material in this category. Flexible packaging is, go ahead. It's more than just the juice pouch.
Right.
There's any number.
I think you could also look at the films, and the films are probably in the same area as well. All the bags of plastic bags for potato chips and snack foods and cookies and energy bars, some of which are produced by very socially responsible B Corps, but also no real great solution for those materials. But yeah, with the flexibles themselves, you've got all sorts of things. Food is in it, but also detergent, pet food, and all kinds of things that may or may not really need such a sophisticated kind of packaging. Clearly, there's some areas like dried fruit and certain kind of foods where it prevents spoilage and increases the life of the package. But others, I think it's more marketing. It's a shiny surface that you can advertise on, and perhaps not the most appropriate packaging. If we're talking about like detergent, I don't think it's really essential. You don't have to worry about spoilage for detergent. So why put those in these pouches? It's more marketing.
Well, there's a language in retail. It faces up nice. It faces up. That's the language of retailer. That's one of why it's so popular, is because you really do get strong graphics, strong color when you use flexible packaging. That's part of why it keeps coming forward in the marketplace.
It seems like such a dichotomy for me. I'm seeing that type of packaging, like organic baby food. So it's manufacturers trying to do the right thing by giving us, high quality organic products, but in packaging that's not socially conscious at all. So it just seems like such a dichotomy. And I had this kind of aha moment the other day in the sushi area within a retailer, and I was just kind of dumbfounded that they were serving this lovely sushi in plastic packaging. And my thought was, isn't that the direct threat to the livelihood of sushi in general?
You talk about the fish, yeah.
Yeah, serving it in plastics. It's a huge dichotomy going on here. I don't know how to bridge the gap.
Is it
right.
Psychologically? Go ahead.
Well, yeah.
I understand her.
Ironically, that plastic ends up in the ocean and degrades. Those fish could be unfortunately eating pieces of that plastic, which could, of course, imperil their health and ours if we're consuming those fish. So this is a subject of a lot of research right now about the impact in the food chain for marine animals, how much plastic is affecting not only the animals themselves, but being absorbed into the skin and the meat of these fish, and eventually being passed on to humans. So it is a real concern. So what could be some of the solutions in dealing with this huge mass of pouches and flexible packaging? Well, there's two big companies have told us, Unilever and Procter & Gamble, that they are working on technological fixes that could make these mechanically recycled, but that they're probably a couple years away from being developed. So it's good news that these companies that are putting a lot of these materials on the market are actively trying to find a way to get those mechanically recycled. In the interim, they could be collected, and a couple things could be done with them. One was an experiment done here in California a few months ago, where Dow Chemical collected them, sponsored a program where they were collected in a purple bag, and people threw that bag full of those pouches into their curbside bin, and those were then pulled out at the MRF and sent to a pyrolysis unit up in Oregon. So that converts it into oil, which some people are okay with. Others are a little uncomfortable with pyrolysis, seeing it being a little too close to incineration, and it does convert it from a plastic into an oil or a petroleum product. But at least it showed that this project showed that people could be convinced to collect these separately, to put them into the bag, and something positive, hopefully something positive done with them. The other thing I'm aware of is that TerraCycle, of course, collects these from a number of brands that sponsor this work, and they have a process where these can be melted down and extruded into plastic items like plastic decking, lawn chair, children's playgrounds, and so forth. And so that gives it one more life. It doesn't give it many lives. So again, that's another positive. It keeps it a plastic, which I think is positive. But long term, I would still like to find a process, of course, I think we all would, where these could be reused over and over in some kind of a loop technology.
Well, a loop, then almost by definition, the pouch, I mean, there's two thoughts that go through my mind. First of all, the pouch itself would have to be a homogeneous material. It would have to be a polymer or a material. And because for that material to be recovered, or for an optical sorter to recognize a material, it would have to be pretty homogeneous. But that doesn't exist right now. But the other thought that goes into mind is what Bill McDonough calls the monstrous hybrids, which some baby foods come in, which is the pouch is attached. The pouch is soft, but it's attached to a rigid spout, a squeeze spout. Now that one's a little tougher because you're dealing with the same issue that there's soft plastic pouches with rigid spouts in wine, for instance. There's a wine box, and that's virtually impossible to recycle. Not because the plastics themselves aren't recyclable, but because they're fused together, and the soft plastic melt point is different than the rigid plastic. So you'd literally have to cut them apart and recycle them separately. I want to back up a bit and go to this purple bag experiment. How did they incentivize people to source separate the bags? What made these people happy sorters?
No, I don't think there was a special incentive. That's a good question. I did not read that there was any special incentive. They just did outreach and education to a portion of this community outside Sacramento. We are going to give you the opportunity, to recycle these materials, and here's how you do it. We're going to give you a purple bag, and we'd like you to try to do it. And so part of it was to see how many people would do that, and it was a substantial amount, not a huge amount, but I know they were encouraged at the number of people who did participate. And so I think that part is certainly valuable for any kind of future system, to know that people do realize this is something that's going right into the garbage now, right into the landfill, and feel bad about that, and would make the effort to separate it out and put it into another stream, whether it's a pyrolysis stream or a recycling stream.
The thing about pyrolysis that you and I can check into more is, it seems to me it's a lot of energy to get energy. You expend a lot of energy to get the little bit of energy back. Seems like it's against the laws of thermodynamics. It's like, why put all that energy into recovering it when you get less energy out? It seems like maybe the equation doesn't quite work in normal economic
And with the price
terms.
of oil now, I think also,
go ahead,
if you keep it as a plastic, it's more valuable than if you try to convert it into petroleum or a product. Yeah.
The irony that cheap oil doesn't help it. That's interesting.
But I see that's a huge issue, I think, for all grocery stores, brands, because they are putting a lot of resources into these materials, and unfortunately haven't really thought about the end of life scenario, and now are reluctantly being coaxed into doing that. And so I'm glad to see a couple of projects on that out there, but we certainly need to have a lot more ingenuity and a lot more creativity to see what we can come up with in terms of sparing these materials from the landfill.
So there is this press release that came out from ACC, American Chemical Council. I probably should try to make sure I read it correctly. Flexible packaging is target of recycling study is the headline from the Recycling Today magazine. They're calling it, the project is be calling material recoveries for the future, which I think neurolinguistically that's kind of funny. If materials are recovered for the future, and if they're never recovered in the present, then there is no future for the recovery for the future because they weren't recovered now. But anyway, I just think it's funny they chose it to be material recovery for the future. That's the name of the project, and it's being headed up by RRS out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And yeah. So it includes Dow Chemical Company, PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble, Nestle's, Purina Pet Care, Sealed Air, SC Johnson, as well as the Association for Post-Consumer Plastics Recyclers, the Flexible Packaging Association, and SPI, which is the American Chemical Council's, it's the resin identity code. It's called the SPI, Plastic Industry Trade Association.
But isn't that positive in terms of the manufacturers? Because, we've talked with Conrad a few times now, and it seems it goes back to some type of aggregate or some type of conversations from the manufacturers to agree to produce more responsibly and also more like across the board. So is that a positive that they're kind of getting around together, at least having a talk?
I'll answer first and he can answer. My take on it is if they pull enough money together, then they are responsible. If they don't pull enough, again, and that's just it, then this is just a study. And then it goes on a shelf somewhere and it becomes the study.
Right.
But if they pull enough money, then maybe it works. That, to me, it's always been a question of the threshold of what's enough money to actually get it going. That's why I asked Conrad the question about why people would even put it in a purple bag. What makes them do that. Go ahead, Conrad.
Right, I agree with you, Tom. It really is a situation where industry has to step up and indicate how broadly they would be willing to make this happen. It's great to make it happen in one particular county, but when you're talking about the varied nature of the United States, it could be a mammoth job. It could be a lot of investment needed to get this material into a MRF. Although I can see the value of developing the secondary market of what we call PERFs, or plastics recycling facilities, so that if these are collected and then sent out to another facility that has more specialized ability to process. Key thing is because in fashion, unless they're valued for something, for some kind of solution where there's the ongoing demand and a price that covers the cost of collection and processing. So that, I think that is still the key issue, and that's still to be determined.
It's a great question, is because of course they're promoting the package. Not only does it face up well, but it's lightweight, quote unquote. In other words, you get more product per package unit. That's what they mean by lightweighting. And it's true that it is lightweighter, and therefore it ships well in a freight sense. At the same time, if it costs more to recycle, really get it recovered, you lose half of the reason why it was cheap in the first place. So it's a great question whether they can actually pay for it. These separate recycling centers for plastic may be necessary, to your point, because my experience at MRFs is that anything that is relatively flat, which of course a flexible packaging would be, it would tend to act like paper, and then all of a sudden the flexible packaging would tend to go with the paper. And I don't think that's obviously why they don't want to do that. That would contaminate the paper, the fiber. The other choice, because it is bright, the other choice would be to hand sort it. Mm-hmm. And that would seem pretty labor intensive. But maybe I'm wrong. We'll see what the study has to say.
So there could be some really valuable insights about that out of this study. I agree.
Yes, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Another headline we want to talk to you about, and you actually sent this to me. U.S. tossing out 5 pounds of trash per day, twice what the EPA had thought.
Right. So this, I think, for professional recycling professionals who are even more technically, certainly more technically adept than I am, I know there's been an ongoing debate for years over how the EPA estimates the amount of materials being recycled, and so I think this is an addition to that. My understanding is that instead of just using sales of materials and estimates of collection, that they went out and actually used figures from recyclers, and came up with these numbers that are a little disturbing, showing a lot more materials being wasted, generated and wasted, I guess, and so it shows we still have a long way to go, even in just measuring the problem.
5 pounds is a lot a day. I mean, that's a lot.
5 pounds of trash per person per day.
Because if you think about the weight of your bag of trash, it's usually empty air stuff. Conrad, do you know how the program is going in Seattle with individuals having to separate even organics now? Residential, right?
Well, I mean, they have
Right.
they have curbside green
But
waste.
it's it's a mandate now in Seattle. Is that correct?
You can be
Right.
fined for putting you'd be fined for putting green waste in your trash.
How do you know how that program's going?
Well, the last piece of news out of there wasn't really so much about the success of the program, but that some individuals felt their privacy was being violated by having the inspectors open up the bins and make sure that organics was in the right bin and recycling was in the right bin, and filed a lawsuit. So it's kind of, no pun intended, created a diversion of that issue to privacy and legal issues. But my understanding was that it's doing well, but like any new behavioral change, it takes time, and I'm not sure if they have measured it, but it's kind of a human experiment there to see how quickly people can change behavior.
Yeah, and the incentive there is to not be fined. But it's illegal to open someone's trash.
Is it?
It's illegal.
I thought
Not even for evidence in any murder can you open trash.
Really, I thought once it was on the curb, it's in the public domain. I thought it was no.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, this is worth looking up, folks.
It's interesting. And
I thought once it was in the public, once it was on the curb, it wasn't yours anymore. It was in the public domain.
No, it's illegal. But how else are they going to monitor if there's food scraps without looking in the bin?
Well,
Right.
of course, that's. Go ahead.
Or what happened?
Do you know anything about the? Do you know anything about the First Amendment rights of trash?
No, I haven't advanced to that level. But it's a good question, because in many communities you do have people coming around scavenging for your bottles and cans, and some of them mix up the stuff, and so how you could be fined for someone else diverting stuff after you've carefully sorted it. So it is frustrating that you really can't control stuff even when it's on the curb.
Well, kudos to them for at least trying to do the right thing. They'll figure it out, and hopefully that's a pilot. A friend of mine that works at the EPA has actually helped put that program together, and I'm really happy for them that they kickstarted it, and I hope that, it works so we can kind of follow suit in other cities.
Right.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Conrad again. I hope we can visit with you again, and next time when you're not on a wireless, because we really enjoy the conversation with you. And what I love is that you are so aware of so many of these huge, grave issues, but you yet remain positive. So we thank you for that.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And we'll keep the conversation going.
I'll see you in Oakland.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Melissa. Bye-bye.
Bye.